Good afternoon. Welcome to the tea table. I am so happy you have joined me today. And we're inside in my little cozy kitchen. And I'll tell you why. Because we are going to go to the land of Holland. And I have a special doll here. Her name is Jana, and it means God's gracious gift. Jana in Dutch is, I think, the female derivative of the name of John or Johann. Well, she's wearing this beautiful little Dutch outfit, and I want you to see her close because she has wooden shoes. And she's holding tulips. And there she is, this beautiful little Dutch doll. And she's going to be with us today on the tea table. And this little corner here is kind of my European corner of my kitchen. This little red cabinet behind me holds all of my European little collection of different things through the years. And I have a lot of Norwegian things and Dutch things, German things, and Russian, and every country. But I've always been attracted to the blue and white Delft china, which I know many of you love. And every country has blue and white china. But I decided to research why do the Dutch so specialize in the blue and white Delft, and it says Delft on it. Now, if you haven't gotten your tea yet, please pause, get your tea, and I'll be waiting for you. Well, I have a lovely tray for you today, and it's all blue and white. And I found the last 2 roses of summer, and I put them in a little blue and white pitcher. And we are playing for our music today. We're playing Corelli. And I thought it was fitting because he's really near Rembrandt, the great Dutch painter that we all are so familiar with. And his paintings hang, many of them, in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Well, Holland is a very special place, very special indeed. And I have always thought my kitchen would be, in my mind, a Dutch Scandinavian kitchen. And for years I had a blue and white kitchen, and then touches of yellow and blue and white plates hanging and different things. We've all done this. But they say that yellow, blue, and white are energy colors. They're very good for getting work done. And we all know the kitchen is where we do a lot of work. Yes. I don't care how old you are or how young you are. Everyone has to help out, right? So this teapot actually is not Dutch. However, it relates very closely because I'm going to tell you the story of Delft china. But first, here is a cup for you. And I don't know if you want cream or sugar. And here is a cup for me. I will pour out. We're using good black tea today, a combination, kind of a lavender Earl Grey mixed with a Kenyan. It's a nice combination. So I'll put that there. Now, for me, this is a little baby this particular teapot, I don't have a creamer and sugar, so I found this in my blue and white collection, and it's very little, and I'll tell you what it says on it. It says Kuchenbach, and I looked it up, and it means flowers, flower garden. And this is the most famous flower garden in all of Europe. Now let me just pour a little milk in my tea. I've got a lot going on here. And I'll put that back. And I think I'll move your tea here, so I can have my tea a little closer. And it comes on just a little plate, and the flower garden is in a town in Holland called Lisse, L-I-S-S-E, or Lisse. And it's the largest flower garden in the world. It's only open from March until the end of May every year, and people come from all over the world. And there's every kind of garden. It's not just tulips. They have an English garden, and everyone says it's fabulous. I've never been there, but I thought, we know the Dutch love their tulips. And you know, I read a lot of stories about World War II. And I remember an elderly man had 2 Dutch gulden, that was money, 2 left. And he used one for bread and one for flowers. That's how important flowers are to the Dutch. Oh, that's absolutely delicious tea today. Oh, that is so nice. Now, every country, I said, has blue and white. I'm going to show you. Well, first of all, this is a little windmill that hangs in my home, and it's surrounded with pewter. And I think it's pretty old. And it doesn't say Delft on the back, but it's kind of like a porcelain plate with the beautiful windmill and the boats. And if you've studied anything about Holland, you know everything surrounds the water, because the Dutch people literally took their land from the sea, and they built dikes, big walls. I'm going to just remove these for a minute so I can show you this beautiful tray. You're going to love it. It's one of my favorite trays, and it's pewter, and it's blue and white porcelain. And it has a marking on the back, and I know it's from Holland, and it's old, and I really love it. And it is the perfect size for a tea set. Now this is also, it's a Chinese scene or an Asian scene. This is a very fine jar, and it says Delft on the back. And I'm going to tell you the story of the Delft china. What happened was, Holland in the 1600s, you remember when the Pilgrims went to Holland and then came to America? Well, Holland was like one of the greatest nations. They had seaworthy vessels, and even though they were a small country, they were very hardworking, and they were going all over the world. And they had the Dutch Indian Bay Company. You know, England had theirs also, but Holland got there first, and they got all the coffee contracts. And then they knew about this beautiful porcelain from China, because they had been around by Asia and China, and they would dock there. And the Chinese did not want anyone to know their secret for making the beautiful ceramics. So they would bring their wares to the shores and sell them to the Dutch traders. And then China required that the traders once a year would go and meet the emperor of China, and they would have to hike inland. It's quite a fascinating story. So Holland was really ahead of the game in making this beautiful china. And do you remember William and Mary? You've heard of the school, William and Mary, right? Well, Mary Stuart was the daughter of King James II. And he bequeathed her to marry William of Orange from Holland. And William came to England. They had a wonderful marriage. They loved each other. And they created really what we know today as the constitutional monarchy. William was Protestant, and so then they were not under the Catholic Church anymore. And they created a constitutional monarchy, which was a parliament. So there were checks and balances. The king did not have absolute power from that time on. You had the courts, the parliament, and then the royal house, balancing one another. Well, William and Mary were beloved. And she discovered when she went to Holland all this beautiful blue and white Delft china, and she wanted it. And so when they came back to England, they wanted to live at Hampton Court. Well, the people wanted them to be living at Windsor Palace or one of the big palaces, but they said, no, we love Hampton Court. And so they said, okay, well, you have to upgrade this. So they brought in artisans and painters, and I've been to Hampton Court. It has absolutely the most beautiful tapestries lining the walls that were hand-done needlework back in the time of Henry VIII, which was, of course, before this. But they brought you've seen the blue and white Dutch tiles that will sometimes line the fireplaces of the Dutch houses. That's the kind of work they wanted done at Hampton Court. And so they brought this china in, and everyone loved it. Well, then the English started experimenting, and there was a Meissen china from Germany, and the scientists got involved, and they wanted to create, and so they figured out the formula for making china. And so that's really then Britain just exploded with all their creative, colorful china. But the reason there was so much produced in Holland was they had gone into this town, it's Lisse, Lisse, and it had had big factories that were not being used, and they were able to use those and mass produce. And this was just quite amazing. And then the Dutch, of course, had their coffee. Well, because the British didn't get there first, they were able to get a lot of tea from India and then from Africa. So before that time, coffee was more popular. They said there were 2,000 coffee houses in London. But once that English trading company went out and established the tea, they had such a good contract. They advertised and got everybody drinking tea. Isn't that interesting? And then out of that came the teacups and the teapots and the tea creamers and the sugar and the formal ceremony of having tea and afternoon tea and high tea and morning tea, tea in the kitchen. And even the workers in England, they have their tea, because when I lived in England, they would have stands where they sell tea, cups of hot tea, and the milk is already in it. You can put sugar in if you want, and it's in paper cups, just like we would buy Starbucks coffee. They would buy tea, at least in the 1970s. Now we have Starbucks everywhere, so everyone's drinking everything, I think. But I will tell you that William and Mary were very beloved, and then she got a fever and died, and he was brokenhearted. They had true love, which always wasn't the case in the royal marriages, but they had true love. And they were admired, obviously, by the Americans because they created William and Mary College, which is still going back east. And I feel the Dutch, they've contributed so much. Dutch, much, it rhymes. The Dutch have contributed so much. I could write a song or a poem. Well, our little treat, I think, is appropriate. And I got these actually for my granddaughter, but do you know what? They're for everyone. They're the letters, the little gingerbread letters. Yes. And my other daughter that has kids was asking me, are there numbers? But I think there's just letters in here. Maybe there are numbers too. But it's a fun way. Even little tiny toddlers, you can give them, here's a T. And this is what I would do. I'd say, here's your T. T for Tommy. T, 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 and give them phonics. I did that with the piano. When I taught my kids middle C, I would say, now there's the 2 bunny ears. Now let's touch C. C for cat. Ka, ka, ka. Then you're teaching them phonics and music. And then next note, D for dog. Da, da, da. E for egg. Eh, eh, eh. F for frog. Fa, fa, fa. It worked. Now you could do that with these little letters. They're very nice with tea. I was serving them last night to everyone. And my husband really liked them. They're very light. Well, I've always been attracted to Holland. I think it's because I read The Silver Skates, you know, that beautiful story. And oh my goodness, it is the most wonderful story to read. And Hans Brinker and the Silver Skates. And the lady that wrote it, this is fascinating. She never left America. She researched and she put all the history of Holland in that story. She dedicated it to her father, who was Dutch, and it tells you what it is. The Zuider Zee is their river, and they go around on ice skates, the only way they could travel. And then the people that had a little bit of money would ride in like an ice sled, and someone would push them, like the wealthy lady with the furs. But all the children had their ice skates, and Hans Brinker and his sister were so poor, they couldn't get metal skates. They had wooden skates. But they go through all the towns of Holland. And I think Holland is so, the windmill, the beautiful windmills, they're actually, here it is, they're across. They're four-sided, very balanced. And their windmills are beautiful. They're wooden, and you go inside them and they, you know, Johann Sebastian Bach, the great composer, his ancestor worked in one of the windmills. And it was said that that rhythm and beat that the windmill kept is what taught the Bachs the rhythm and beat for music. Isn't that fascinating? Life connects. Everything we do connects one with another. We as people connect, and we want to connect with God's love. We want to have, when we leave people, we want people to feel happier after they meet us, don't we? We don't want to make anyone feel bad, bring anyone down. We want to lift up and encourage. That's what God wants us to do. That's what God does to us. Well, you know, I don't have a Dutch flag, but the Dutch flag has red, white, and blue, 3 stripes, And it's the first flag that used just three color stripes. But I have this flag that is supposed to be a Norwegian flag, even though this is the real Norwegian flag that I have over here. But this is somehow kind of also accepted. I don't know, I didn't hear the history of it, but it also reminds me of the Dutch flag. So I thought I'll just let that be right there. You know, the Dutch people are right between Scandinavia and Germany. And they are ethnically a blend of the German and the Scandinavian. So they're very hard workers. And most of them have the blue eyes, and many, though, are dark. But this little girl, she's got the blonde hair and the blue eyes and the beautiful braid. And she's bringing somebody flowers. Bringing flowers is so nice. And I know people bring flowers here, but you know, I will tell you, in Europe, everyone brings flowers for the birthday party. I remember we were a part of a birthday party for Karina. And 12 people came. It was all music teachers from the music camp. And it was in her little castle. It's a real castle from the Middle Ages. This camp was held in the monastery at Lilienfeld Monastery. And we had to clean everything up and get it ready. Well, we had gone to the conditorry to get a cake, but they didn't have a whole cake. They only had few, because they sell it by slice there. So my daughter Elizabeth said, why don't we get 3 pieces of each of the 4 cakes and make a cake? It was perfect. There was chocolate. There was a Nuss, which is nut in German and Austrian. Oh my goodness, it looked like a carrot cake, but it was all different ground nuts. Fabulous. Then I think a yellow lemon, and then perhaps a white cream. I don't remember. But it worked perfect. Exactly 12 people came. We had 12 pieces with her nice china, and everyone brought flowers. And her apartment in her castle was like a garden. It became a garden. So beautiful. How appropriate. And I loved it. Everyone sat at the table. She had a chair for everyone. We all sat together, 12 of us, and had a formal piece of cake and coffee. It wasn't just grab it and go sit on a couch. It was so nice to sit together at a table and have it the old-fashioned way. A table is so nice to be able to sit and talk and converse. Yes. Well, you know, I brought along just a few. I have a lot of little Dutch things. And then because, I don't know, through the years, well, my sister-in-law, she moved to Arizona and she brought me a box of her blue and white. She thought, Susan, you like blue and white? Here it is. So oh my goodness, that's like bringing tea to China. But I have them on my windowsill and I see them and I think of her. So I found a place for them. And I brought just a few to show you. This is one of my favorites. It's a little boy and a girl in the boat, and you can set them. They're a salt and pepper shaker. Isn't that darling? Now, I think my husband got me this way back years ago when we went to Leavenworth. And this is a Dutch, and they all say on the back, Delft. So creative. The Dutch are so creative. And then here's a little, this is sweet. The little girl, the milkmaid carrying. The Dutch people had to work so hard. Can you imagine taking a land, building walls so to keep the North Sea out? They are hard workers, hard workers. And then if they get a leak, remember the little boy that stuck his finger in the dike? They get a leak, they have to fix it, and all the men go out. There's so many beautiful songs, Dutch folk songs about the boats and romance, but hard work. And Holland has a beautiful heritage. And then this is not from Holland. This is a Spode, but it's a blue and white, and it's from England. And Spode came after Delft, so I think they copied. But this reminds me of Holland, because if you visit a Dutch traditional home, they always had a library. They love their books, they love their learning. And they would have a podium, like it would look like a music stand with an open Bible. They're very Christian people, and the father would read the Bible every day to the family. Well, we have a little town here called Linden, up by the border, Canadian border. It's a Dutch Reformed town. They have tulips, and they have a museum there that has a room like that. And so this cup, I thought, I'm going to bring this. This cup is so beautiful, and what it says is, it says literature, and it has the man lecturing in school, see? That says literature, and then on the back, it has a pen and an ink for writing, and it says philosophy, literature and philosophy. And it's Spode. And the Dutch loved their hymns, their pipe organs, their singing. I heard a program once that went Classical King FM. It was the Organ Loft, and he went to Holland, and he recorded the Dutch people singing their hymns. Now, these were hymns I had never heard. They are absolutely beautiful. Great musicians in Holland, and sing with all their heart. They really sing with their whole heart. And the men and the harmonies, rich indeed. And so this mug just reminds me of that. And it says, yes, scholarship, literature, philosophy. And then there's pictures of the schools. Now this is English, and it may be Cambridge and Oxford. And it has a harp. I love symbolism. This is a reproduction, old design. And there is a cathedral in Victoria, BC, built turn of the century. And I believe it's called King's Cathedral. Christ the King Cathedral, I believe. It's at the top of the hill. You can't miss it. It has the most beautiful stained glass windows I have ever. They are so unusual, and each section has a story, and one of them is for farming and harvest, and they have all the beautiful harvest. Then they have education and literature, and then they have one for music, and then one for theology. And the man who designed, if you've been to Victoria, the Parliament building, there's beautiful stained glass in there also, down by the water. He designed, the architect, the cathedral. And if you ever go to Victoria, you can just go to a service there, and they often have concerts also. Beautiful. And then I brought one more cup. Now this is really special. This is the French side, but it has a windmill. I want to show you. So it's probably from Normandy, France, pictures. And it is so fragile. And there's the church and the boat. And do you know what it says on the back? This is really old. It says Versailles. And somehow all of this connects the French, because the French Hugenots designed much of Versailles. Much of the architecture was done by them. They were so creative, and they had to flee when Catherine de' Medici was the queen. She did not want the Protestants there, and life was hard, so they had to flee. There was a massacre, the Bartholomew Day massacre, and then they ran north and ended up, a lot of them, in Belgium and Holland, and then they went over to England. So they brought along their skills, and they say many of these Huguenots were the Delft painters. They were artisans and lace makers and workers of finery. You know, behind everything, there's a story. And I was telling my daughter, I said, you know, one could study history through just studying the history of coffee and tea, and then the china. And that's why if you go to a garage sale, a thrift shop, an antique store, you see a nice piece, you see a symbol on the back, look it up on your Google. Educate yourself. It's like going to a museum. It's so nice, so fun. Well, I'm wearing brown today and a little bit of black with it. My shawl, you can't see it, but it has these nice marks, and I thought it really looked, I might stand up for you to show you. It kind of looks old Dutch to me because one of my favorite people in all of church history is Erasmus, and he's Dutch. He's a contemporary with Martin Luther. They write letters back and forth. Erasmus is a brilliant scholar. He reminds me very much of Thomas Jefferson. I don't know why, I just have the feeling when I read about his life. Well, he did the translation of the Bible. Wonderful translation that was then used, and then Martin Luther also translated the Bible into German. These were fine minds, and Erasmus was Dutch and contributed so much, as Rembrandt did, and the great Dutch artists. And one of the things that I learned from Francis Schaeffer when I was at L'Abri years ago, he gave a lecture on Rembrandt and the Reformation. And he said what Rembrandt was doing, what the Reformation painters were doing, were painting real people doing real things. You know the famous picture by Vermeer of the girl pouring the pitcher of milk? And what that was saying is that everything we do in our life is worship. If we make the bed in the morning and do a good job, it's worship. Washing the dishes, doing a good job, sweeping the floor, serving a cup of tea, just like I serve one to you. I'm doing God's will. And that's what makes God happy, when we're busy. And the Reformation released people to realize that religion was not just some spiritual idea you live in your mind, but it was a practical living, a life of meaning, of living out God's love, giving our best one to another. Yes. Well, I am so happy you have joined me today. And I hope you're having a good week. I know the news we hear is so upsetting. And I am still praying for Israel every day and the Middle East, and praying for the peace of Jerusalem. And we need to continue to do that. God will do something for us. That is our hope. Yes, that's our hope. Well, the little girl is so sweet, and I think it's so clever how people can make a doll and get the whole little costume. Those wooden shoes are so precious. And her little hat and her tulips. Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you've enjoyed this. And if you have any interest in the Delft china, just Google it, look up, and you can read more of the history. It's fascinating. And the history of tea and coffee. Yes. Well, thank you again, and I hope you have a fabulous week. My friend is planning already a little Christmas tea. She told me she's going to invite her neighbors in. I said, that is the most beautiful thing you can do. So I encourage all of you, be brave. Don't don't worry, it doesn't have to be perfect. Do your best, but it'll help you get your house decorated and then have a little Christmas tea in early December. And you will bless everyone. Thank you so much. Now, I look forward, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. Push the notification, the share button, and if you liked it, the like button. Thank you so much, and God bless all of you with a good, happy, blessed week.